Go away or I'll call the police. That's what my own daughter screamed at me, on Thanksgiving night, in front of the entire family. I didn't fight back. I didn't even raise my voice. I just picked up my coat and walked away. But here's the thing, 6 months later, a judge would force her to pack her boxes instead. Justice had a funny way of showing up. You won't believe how it happened. Stay with me till the end, and hit subscribe if you think respect should never be optional. The day after that phone call, I stood in the middle of my dad's old driveway in Cedar Falls, staring at the brick house that had been my entire childhood. The September sun beat down, but all I felt was cold. Mom passed away years ago, and now Dad was gone too. It should have been a moment of quiet grief, of remembering the man who used to take me fishing down at Lake Redfield, or the way he never missed a Friday night football game. Instead, all I could think about was how, in less than 2 minutes on the phone, my half-brother Tyler made me feel like a stranger in my own family. Tyler had always been Dad's golden child, or at least, that's what he told everyone. He was the one who stayed close, helped with the yard, came over for Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, I had left town, gone to college in Chicago, built my career in HR consulting, and tried to prove myself without asking Dad for a dime. I thought Dad respected that about me. I thought he was proud of the way I worked my way up, even when I was eating ramen to make rent. But walking up to that house, I felt this knot of dread. Tyler's truck was parked out front, the back loaded with boxes like he was already moving in. The front door was wide open, voices echoing inside. I stepped in and immediately froze. Tyler's wife, Ashley, was in the living room, already sorting through Dad's things, his books stacked in piles, his clothes dumped into garbage bags. "Hey," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. Ashley barely glanced up. "Oh, didn't expect you here." I gritted my teeth. This was my dad's house. Of course I'd be here. Before she could respond, Tyler walked in from the kitchen, carrying Dad's old coffee mugs like trophies. "Maggie, you really shouldn't be here right now. The will's already been settled. Dad left the house to me." My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I talked to Dad about this. He promised everything would be split fairly. Tyler smirked, and I swear I saw a flash of satisfaction in his eyes. "Well, guess he changed his mind. I've got the paperwork to prove it." He didn't even sound sad. He sounded smug, like he'd won some kind of twisted game. I walked past him into Dad's office, the room that always smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and old leather. The desk drawers were open, papers scattered everywhere. I ran my hand over the desk where I used to do homework while Dad balanced his checkbook. Now it felt like the whole place had been ransacked. That's when the thought hit me, if Tyler really had legal papers, I needed to see them. And not just see them. I needed to verify them. I work in HR, I know contracts, signatures, and the way people manipulate legal loopholes. Tyler might think he could bully me out of my inheritance, but he clearly forgot who he was dealing with. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Fine, Tyler. Show me the paperwork. If Dad really did this, then I'll walk away. But if you're lying," I leaned closer, meeting his eyes, "you'll regret underestimating me." Tyler disappeared into Dad's office for a moment and came back holding a manila envelope. He slapped it down on the kitchen counter like he was serving an eviction notice. "There," he said, tapping the flap with 2 fingers. "Dad signed this 3 months ago. The house is mine, the savings account's mine, and everything else, well, that's basically junk. Sorry, sis. Guess Dad just didn't think you needed much." My hands shook as I pulled the papers out. It was a copy of a will, dated in June. Dad's signature sat neatly at the bottom. My chest tightened. I remembered June. That was around the time Dad was in and out of the hospital for his heart problems. He'd been weak, exhausted, barely able to stand without help. You expect me to believe Dad signed this when he could barely hold a fork? I shot back. Tyler folded his arms, smirking. He was perfectly lucid. The notary even came here. "Ask Ashley," she was in the room. Ashley chimed in without looking up from the piles of junk mail she was sifting through. "Yep. I saw him sign it myself. Clear as day." I stared at them, rage bubbling in my chest. Funny, considering Dad called me in July saying he wanted both of us to have equal shares. He specifically mentioned the house being split. Tyler's smile widened, smug as ever. Maybe he just didn't want to hurt your feelings, Maggie. You always were the sensitive one. That did it. My vision blurred hot with tears I refused to let fall. Sensitive? No. I was loyal. I was the one who stayed up on the phone with Dad at midnight when his blood pressure spiked, even if I was 3 states away. I was the one who wired money when the hospital bills piled up. Tyler lived 10 minutes away and couldn't be bothered to drive him to half his appointments. And now he wanted to paint me as the outsider. I shoved the will back into the envelope. If this is legit, it'll hold up in probate court. But if it's not, if I even smell fraud, you're going to wish you hadn't messed with me. Tyler chuckled. You really think a judge is going to side with you? Please. You left Cedar Falls years ago. You're basically a stranger. I'm the one who was here. Everyone knows that. His words hit like a knife. That's what he wanted, to make me feel like an intruder in my own home, in my own bloodline. Before I could answer, Ashley tossed a bag of Dad's shirts onto the floor. Honestly, Maggie, don't you have your own life? A nice job in Chicago, a 401k or whatever. Let Tyler handle this. He was Dad's real caretaker. Real caretaker. I laughed bitterly. If only they knew the truth, that most nights I was the one calling the pharmacy to make sure Dad had his meds, arranging Uber rides when Tyler flaked, paying out of pocket for repairs on this very house. My nails dug into my palms. You can rewrite the story however you want, but the truth has a way of coming out. And I promise you, it will. Tyler leaned close enough that I could smell the cheap beer on his breath. Try me. You'll lose. Something in his tone, so cocky, so sure, ignited a fire in me. I'd seen enough shady HR cases to know when people were covering their tracks. Tyler had the confidence of someone who thought he'd rigged the game. I turned on my heel, walked out to the front porch, and took a deep breath of the late summer air. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. That house wasn't just wood and bricks. It was Dad's legacy. It was the place where Mom had taught me how to bake pies every Thanksgiving, where Dad had danced with me to old records after my prom night disaster. Losing it meant losing the last tangible connection to them. And worse, it meant letting Tyler rewrite history, making me the outsider, the daughter who didn't matter. No. I wouldn't let that stand. I might have walked out that day empty-handed, but inside, I was already plotting. Tyler thought I'd crumble. Instead, he'd just given me the fuel I needed. Because if there's one thing I know from HR and corporate life, it's that paper trails never lie, and people always get sloppy when they think they've already won. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the pull-out couch in a cheap motel off Highway 20, staring at the water-stained ceiling while the AC rattled like it was on life support. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's smug grin, heard Ashley's condescending tone. But instead of crumbling, my brain kicked into overdrive. Years of HR work had taught me one thing: documents tell stories. And sometimes, those stories don't add up. I pulled out my laptop and started Googling Iowa probate law. Challenging a will. Signs of forgery. My fingers moved on autopilot, fueled by anger and 3 cans of gas station Red Bull. Something interesting popped up almost immediately. Dad's will had to be filed with the county clerk within a certain time frame after his death for probate to begin. So far, no filings had appeared in the online records. That meant Tyler was sitting on the papers, trying to intimidate me before anything became official. Strike 1. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. If the will wasn't filed yet, I still had time to contest it. But I needed evidence. Hard evidence. The next morning, I drove over to Dad's bank, the same credit union he'd used since before I was born. The woman behind the counter recognized me instantly. Margaret Reynolds, right? I'm so sorry about your father. He was always so proud of you. Her words caught me off guard. Proud. That wasn't the language of a man who disowned me in his final months. I explained carefully that I needed to check on Dad's accounts. She looked hesitant, but after I showed her my ID and explained I was his daughter, she gave me a sympathetic nod. The executor usually handles this, but let me print out the balance statement. When she slid the paper across the counter, my eyes nearly popped out of my head. 2 weeks before Dad died, $25,000 had been withdrawn. Cash. I knew Dad. He was frugal to the bone. He kept meticulous records, down to saving gas receipts in envelopes. No way he walked into a bank and pulled out that much cash without a plan, or without telling me. My gut screamed, Tyler. But that wasn't all. On the signature line of the withdrawal slip was Dad's name, except the loops in the R were off, and the letters didn't have that slight rightward slant Dad always had. My HR brain lit up like fireworks. I'd reviewed hundreds of signatures in employee files over the years. This one? It looked like a bad imitation. Strike two. I asked the teller if I could have a copy. She lowered her voice. I probably shouldn't, but given the circumstances, she slipped it into an envelope and handed it over. Don't tell anyone where you got it. I smiled, clutching the envelope like it was gold. You have my word. Walking back to my car, I felt a shift inside me. Yesterday, I'd felt powerless, like Tyler had all the cards. Today, I had the first crack in his story. If he was bold enough to forge a bank slip, what were the chances he'd forged Dad's will too? I sat in the driver's seat, the summer heat turning the interior into an oven, and let the thought sink in. Tyler thought he'd buried me with a stack of paperwork. But now, I had leverage. And the thing about leverage is, you only need a little to flip the whole game. I sat in my car, the fake signature burning in my hand like a live coal, and for the first time in months, I let myself breathe. But then another thought hit me. Why had I been so quiet all this time? Why did I let Ashley scream at me, let Tyler puff his chest like some wannabe king? Because silence had always been my armor. Most people in Cedar Rapids only knew me as Margaret, the quiet HR lady who retired early after a layoff package. They saw my beat-up Ford Fusion, my modest two-bedroom ranch house, and assumed I was scraping by. That was fine with me. But what nobody knew, not even Ashley, was that before HR, I'd been an investigative paralegal for a corporate law firm in Chicago. For 10 years, my bread and butter had been digging into forged contracts, shady accounting, and the kind of fraud that landed executives in federal court. I'd walked away from that life after Ashley was born. The long nights, the stress, the constant fights with my ex-husband, it wasn't worth it. HR felt softer. But the skills? They never disappeared. They were just sitting in a drawer, gathering dust, waiting for the right time. And apparently, that time was now. I opened my old laptop bag, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a folder labeled Tools. Flash drive. Old case notes. Even a magnifying glass I used to compare signatures. My pulse quickened. It felt like pulling out a cape I'd sworn I'd never wear again. The memory that came flooding back was from 2004. A VP at a chemical company had falsified safety inspections. My team had found 3 versions of his signature, subtle differences only someone trained would notice. The case had ended in a $3 million settlement, and my boss had patted me on the back, saying, "You've got the eye of a hawk, Reynolds." That same eye was now staring at Tyler's sloppy forgery. But it wasn't just about proving he faked a bank slip. Something bigger gnawed at me, the will. Dad had always been cautious with legal matters. He'd paid off his mortgage early, kept his 401k diversified, even refused to co-sign a car loan for me in my 20s because, as he put it, credit ties can strangle families. That man would never, in a million years, sign away his house entirely to Ashley and Tyler without a paper trail I could smell from a mile away. And that smell was missing. The more I thought, the more puzzle pieces clicked into place. Tyler had been hovering around Dad in those final months, offering to help with bills. He'd volunteered to drive Dad to doctor appointments, handle errands, even help with mail. At the time, I'd felt relieved. My work schedule was insane, and Ashley wasn't stepping up. But now? Now I saw the setup. Tyler had inserted himself as gatekeeper, probably sliding documents under Dad's shaky hand, maybe even forging a few. And Ashley, sweet clueless Ashley, had eaten up every word, convinced her husband was some knight in shining armor. That night, I drove back to my house and pulled out an old lockbox from the closet. Inside were copies of my own legal documents, my mortgage, my divorce decree, my will. Flipping through them reminded me how the system worked, how every document had to be notarized, filed, stamped. If Tyler had faked the will, he would have needed a notary. And in small towns, notaries leave trails. I smiled. This was starting to feel like a hunt. Then came the memory that stopped me cold. 2 weeks before Dad died, I'd stopped by to drop off soup. Tyler had been there, hovering by the kitchen counter with a stack of papers. When I asked what they were, he'd laughed it off. Just some insurance forms. Don't worry about it. Dad had looked tired, confused. He'd muttered, "It's fine, honey. He's helping." At the time, I let it go. But now? That was the moment. That was when the trap was set. And suddenly, my silence felt less like defeat and more like strategy. Because while Tyler thought he'd erased me, I'd been watching, collecting, waiting. The next day, I made a quiet call to an old colleague in Chicago, Marcus. He'd left the firm years ago to start his own practice, focusing on probate and estate litigation. When he picked up, his deep baritone filled the line. "Reynolds? Haven't heard from you in forever. What's up?" I told him everything: the Thanksgiving blow-up, the supposed will, the bank withdrawal. There was a pause, then a low whistle. "Sounds like classic undue influence and possible forgery. You sitting on evidence." I glanced at the envelope in my passenger seat. Enough to make him sweat. Marcus chuckled. "Then you've got yourself a case. Don't file yet. Gather more. You want the hammer to fall hard." That was Marcus, always patient, always precise. And suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. As I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the car window. For the first time in years, I didn't see the quiet, overlooked mom who got dismissed at Thanksgiving. I saw the woman who once took down corporate sharks with nothing but a magnifying glass and persistence. Ashley's words echoed in my head, "Go away or I'll call the police." Well, sweetheart, the police weren't the ones she should have worried about. It was the judge. And her day in court was coming. The probate courtroom smelled faintly of old wood polish and burnt coffee, like a mix of history and impatience. I sat at the petitioner's table with Marcus, my old colleague turned attorney, while Ashley and Tyler sat across the aisle, whispering furiously to their lawyer, a slick guy in a navy suit who looked like he'd rather be at a golf course. Ashley wouldn't look at me. Tyler did though, smirking like he was still 2 steps ahead. That smirk had carried him this far. He thought charm and bluster could bluff through anything. Not this time. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and zero tolerance for nonsense, called us to order. "We are here to address the contested estate of Robert Reynolds. Counsel, proceed." Marcus stood, his voice steady. "Your Honor, we are challenging the validity of the will presented by the respondents. We allege undue influence and possible forgery, and we request this court to examine new evidence." Ashley shifted in her chair. Tyler's smirk faltered just a touch. Their lawyer went first, waving a stack of papers like he was holding the 10 Commandments. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. The decedent left his house and primary assets to his loving daughter Ashley, as evidenced by this notarized will. My clients are simply fulfilling his wishes." I almost laughed out loud. Loving daughter? The same one who screamed at me to leave my father's house on Thanksgiving? But I kept my mouth shut. Timing was everything. Then Marcus slid our ace across the table. "Your Honor," he said, "we'd like to submit Exhibit A, a withdrawal slip for $40,000 signed under the decedent's name." The judge adjusted her glasses. "And your point, counsel?" Marcus leaned forward, his voice like a knife. "The signature is inconsistent with the decedent's historical records. In fact, we have multiple samples of his authentic signature, and this," he tapped the paper, "shows clear evidence of forgery." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know this?" Marcus glanced at me. "Because my client, Margaret Reynolds, worked for over a decade as a paralegal specializing in contract fraud. She has documented proof, side-by-side analysis, and corroborating testimony from a handwriting expert we've already retained." That was the moment Tyler's smirk disappeared completely. His jaw clenched, and he whispered something sharp to his lawyer. Ashley finally looked at me, her eyes wide. She hadn't known. She thought I was just Mom, the HR retiree with a coupon habit and a rusted-out Ford. But the silence I'd carried for years had become my weapon. The judge nodded slowly. "Very well. We will admit the exhibit. But forgery is a serious allegation, counsel. Do you have more?" Marcus smiled faintly. "We do, Your Honor. Exhibit B, testimony from the notary who allegedly witnessed the signing of this will. When contacted, she stated she had no recollection of notarizing such a document and her seal was stolen 2 years ago. That did it. The courtroom rippled like someone had dropped a stone in water. The judge's face hardened. Tyler's lawyer sputtered, "Objection. Hearsay, not hearsay if the notary testifies in person," Marcus shot back. "And she will." The judge called for a short recess. As people shuffled, Ashley bolted up and rushed toward me. "Mom," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What are you doing?" I turned to face her, calm as ever. "I'm doing what Dad would have done. Protecting what's his. What's ours." Her lip trembled. "But Tyler said," I cut her off. "Tyler lied. And you let him." It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. This was my daughter. But she'd chosen to believe a man with gambling debts and a smirk over the mother who raised her. And now she was learning consequences didn't care about blind loyalty. Back in session, the judge delivered her words like hammer blows. "Given the evidence presented, this court finds significant reason to doubt the validity of the will. Until further review, the estate will be placed under court control, and the property in question will be prepared for a partition sale." Ashley gasped. Tyler swore under his breath. I sat perfectly still. This was the moment. The reversal. For months, they'd strutted around that house like they were untouchable. Now a judge had stripped the illusion in a single sentence. Outside the courthouse, Tyler cornered me by the steps. His charm was gone, only rage remained. "You think you're clever," he spat. "You just cost your own daughter her inheritance." I met his glare. "No. You did that the moment you tried to steal it." He leaned closer, his voice low. "You'll regret this." I smiled faintly. "Funny. That's exactly what the last fraud I caught told me. He's still paying off restitution." Tyler's face drained of color. He stormed off, yanking Ashley by the arm. Marcus walked up beside me, slipping his sunglasses on. "You handled that well." I shook my head. "Doesn't feel well. That was my little girl up there." Marcus paused. "She'll come around. Right now, she's drowning in Tyler's lies. Sometimes the only way to wake someone up is to let the water hit their lungs." I nodded, though my chest ached. He was right. But deep down, I also knew this wasn't over. Tyler wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat gracefully. He'd fight, claw, cheat, whatever it took. And I had to be ready. That night, I drove past Dad's house. The lights were off. The windows looked hollow, empty. For the first time, it didn't feel like home, it felt like evidence. I rolled down the window, let the cold Iowa wind sting my cheeks, and whispered, "Don't worry, Dad. I've got this." Because now the truth was out in the open. The judge had turned the tables. The smirk was gone. And this time, I wasn't backing down. The gavel came down one final time, echoing through the probate courtroom like thunder. The property located at 1427 Willow Creek Lane shall be sold under partition sale. Proceeds will be split 50-50 between Margaret Reynolds and Ashley Reynolds, pending debt settlement. Bang. Just like that, it was over. I sat back in my chair, letting the words wash over me. For months I had carried the weight of Tyler's smug grin, Ashley's cold shoulder, the humiliation of being thrown out of my own father's home. And now the law, the very system Tyler thought he could outsmart, had leveled the playing field. Ashley looked devastated, but I noticed something new in her eyes. The fog was clearing. Tyler sat stone-faced, fists clenched, as though he could hold on to a house the judge had just ripped from his grasp. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler gambled everything on greed, and he lost. Weeks later, the house sold for $310,000. After fees and debts, my share came to just under $150,000. Money wasn't the point. The point was justice. The point was proving that silence doesn't equal weakness, that when pushed too far, even the quietest person can roar. Still, I couldn't help smiling when I deposited that cashier's check. For a woman who'd been told to stay out of it, I'd done more than just stay in it. I'd won. The fallout came fast. Tyler stormed out of Ashley's life when the money vanished. No house, no inheritance, no easy ride. He left her with a trail of overdue credit cards and a leased Dodge Charger she couldn't afford. For weeks, she didn't call me. I figured she was too proud, or too ashamed. Then one chilly Saturday morning, she showed up at my apartment with puffy eyes and a Starbucks cup trembling in her hand. "Mom," she whispered, "you were right." I wanted to stay angry. I wanted to remind her of the night she screamed at me to leave, of how her words cut deeper than Tyler's lies ever could. But she was my daughter. And maybe the only thing harder than forgiving is watching your child crumble under the weight of her own mistakes. So I let her in. Over time, we rebuilt, piece by fragile piece. Therapy sessions. Long drives without Tyler's shadow. A Thanksgiving dinner where, for the first time in years, we sat at the same table without tension pressing against our ribs. It wasn't perfect. Healing never is. But it was ours. One afternoon, as I was balancing my 401k portfolio and sipping chamomile tea, Marcus called. "You know," he said, "most people would have walked away. But you," he chuckled, "you fought back. You did what we used to do in the old days. Expose the fraud. Let the truth speak." I smiled. Guess some habits die hard. That night, I drove by the empty lot where Dad's house once stood. The new owners had torn it down to build a modern place, all glass and steel. It didn't look anything like the home I grew up in, but that was okay. Because Dad's legacy wasn't the bricks, or the siding, or the worn oak banister. His legacy was standing up for what's right, even when it hurts. Even when your own blood turns against you. I rolled down the window, let the Iowa wind bite at my cheeks, and whispered, "We did it, Dad." Ashley pulled up beside me in her beat-up sedan. She stepped out, wrapped her coat tighter, and stood next to me in silence. For the first time, she didn't look like Tyler's shadow. She looked like my daughter again. "Mom," she said softly, "thanks for not giving up on me." I swallowed hard. "Just don't give up on yourself." She nodded, eyes glistening. That was justice. Not just the check from the sale. Not just Tyler slinking off into irrelevance. Justice was the look in my daughter's eyes, the return of the girl I thought I'd lost. And empowerment? That came from knowing I'd taken every insult, every humiliation, every dismissal, and turned them into fuel. So the next time someone tells me to go away, or threatens me with the police, I'll smile. Because I know the truth. You can try to silence me. But you'll never erase me. And if you do cross me, well, let's just say I've got a judge on speed dial. Looking back, I realized this whole ordeal wasn't just about the house, or even the money. It was about something deeper, respect. Being seen for who I was, not what people thought I was worth. For years, I worked my tail off, late nights in the office, maxing out my 401k, paying off my own student loans, because I wanted to prove that I could stand on my own 2 feet. And I did. But Tyler wanted to strip me of my identity, make me believe I was less family because I wasn't Dad's favorite, or because I didn't live next door. What I learned is this: family isn't measured in square footage or bank accounts. It's measured in honesty, loyalty, and the way you show up for each other when it counts. Tyler may have walked away empty-handed in the courtroom, but truth is, he'd been empty all along. No amount of inheritance could fill that void. In America, we're raised on the idea that you can build your life from the ground up. You don't need a trust fund or a family name to succeed. I had already built my own life, my own security, my own independence. Winning the case wasn't about needing the assets, it was about standing my ground and making sure manipulation didn't win. Because when you allow toxic people to rewrite the truth, they don't just take your inheritance, they take your dignity. If you're listening to this and you've been made to feel like the outsider in your own family, hear me, you are not defined by their approval. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is draw a line, fight for what's right, and then walk forward with your head high. I walked out of that courthouse with more than a legal victory. I walked out with peace. And I know Dad would have been proud, not because I won, but because I didn't let anyone bully me out of who I was. And here's the line I'll leave you with, the one I now live by: the inheritance I wanted wasn't in the will, it was in my willpower. If this story hit home for you, don't just scroll past. Hit subscribe, because trust me, there are more stories like this that you do not want to miss.